Welcome to Season 2 of the Cryptopulse podcast, your ultimate guide to the world of crypto, Bitcoin, and world economics. We're here to guide you through the crypto universe with thought-provoking topics, in-depth knowledge, and information to help you make informed decisions. We'll also be interviewing some of the best minds in the industry, such as CEOs of crypto projects, traders, economists, authors, and development teams from around the globe. And now for the episode.
Thanks for joining Ben and I on the show. We much appreciate it. How's things over in Canada?
Really great, thanks. Just got back. Got back from a tour of Europe, and I'm out again in a couple of weeks. But great, thanks. Good to be here.
We were really gutted not to make the Bitcoin conference in Edinburgh. Like we'd planned to go. Fortunately, we have other businesses and other things going on, and the dates just weren't going to work for us. But it looked pretty good. I got some good feedback from other people that went.
They really did a fantastic job. It was first class, and I don't know, about 500 people in the audience, and a really tight community, tight, close-knit community, it felt like. So it was a lot of fun.
Next year, if it's on next year, I'm 100% there. So we were just talking off air before I pressed record, and I mentioned that we've gone through your book. In fact, I listened to the audio book because I'm such a slow reader. So thanks for making sure there's an audio version for people like me that would take a month to read something like this. And it was really helpful. And I said to you, it gave me hope. But I kind of want to give our listeners a little bit of an insight into some of the things that you talked to in the start of the book, because I think this will set the scene for quite a good podcast, or hopefully anyway. So at the moment, we're in a situation where the global debt is higher than it's ever been. And I want to take a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs from the book and just read them out. So in 2000, the total debt in the world was approximately 62 trillion. At the same time, the world economy in 2000 was about 33.5 trillion. And since 2000, the world economy has gone from 33.5 trillion to about 80 trillion. But to achieve that growth, the total debt has grown to over 247 trillion as of Q3 2018. So in other words, it's taken $185 trillion of debt to achieve $46 trillion of global growth. If that was a business, they'd have gone bust a long time ago. So that's kind of the situation that we're in now. And I guess that number's gone a lot higher since the series of money printing through the pandemic. So there's been a lot of questions about how we get out of this and what we can do as individuals and what governments can do. And I want to start by talking a little bit about your pinned tweet, which is we're told we need inflation, but it's not true. It only seems true because the rules of the game were designed that way. So can we start by exploring the rules of the game and what they are?
Sure. How deep do we want to go into this? So I'll start at pretty high level, at first principles level. Technology and the free market are deflationary. They provide productivity, and that productivity should be reducing prices, and those prices should be flowing in a free market. Those lower prices would flow to everybody in the form of increasing their time, so they would get more for less on a constant scale, and they'd keep getting more for less. Every year it would get better and better and better as technology automated or made things better for us. And so our work as technology was doing that, similar to a backhoe taking away tons of labor and people using shovels, our work should be going down in that place, and we should be getting more for less. But we live in a system, a credit-based system, that must take that gain and concentrate that gain into very few hands through inflation. Because the credit-based system would collapse unless you allowed more and more inflation, unless you increase the credit. So today you have two exponential trends that are exact mirror images of each other. One, the free market and technology trying to deliver you more for less. And you can see it. Why you use yourself, you can see it. Why you take more photos today than you did 10 years ago is because they're free. They're completely abundant. You can see it in your calculator app. You can see it everywhere around you as on your phone, what it's giving you. But it's competing against an economic system that must do the exact opposite, deliver less for more. And so that credit-based system must expand, or the credit-based system collapses. So when people hear deflation, they get worried, and they think deflation is bad. But what they're conflating in deflation is bad. They're conflating the collapse of a credit-based system with what would be natural deflation. And the collapse of a credit-based system, if you imagine every single thing is built on top of the credit-based system, our banks are, all of value is, our houses are, it's all on top of that credit-based system. So if you have a collapse in it, the whole system collapses and resets. So alternatively, what's happening is governments are trying to make the credit on an increasing exponential trend against technology. They're trying to pay back the credit by destroying the value of the dollar. It's their only other choice. So there's choice one, let the system collapse, and that would look like anarchy all around the world. Choice two is reduce the debt in real terms, which is make the money worth less. And as you make the money worth less, people are working harder and harder and harder trying to keep up, and you're concentrating all of the control in very few hands. And it leads to civil unrest, and then it leads to war. So those are the two choices out of our existing system, because we've wired a system based on increasing credit forever.
Okay, so we're borrowing more and more money. Central banks are creating more money. Governments are borrowing more and more money. But we're being told that taxes need to be raised to pay that back. Yet, one of the problems that technology creates, if it is a problem, of course, it depends which way you look at it, is the amount of jobs that are available. So technology, robotics, AI will replace a lot of jobs that exist now. So without those jobs, how's the economy going to grow to pay back these debts? And I've asked politicians, I've asked different people this question, and no one seems to have an answer. And to me, it doesn't actually seem like it's possible. Am I wrong there?
No, it's not answerable, and that's why that's why they keep doing what they're doing. You can't answer that question; it's impossible. So, politics, taxes, the entire system is theater, complete theater, because it doesn't matter if most of the revenue doesn't come from taxes, but it comes from theft, and theft is a strong word, but when you manipulate money, and you steal money from the working class and poor and transfer it to the wealthy, that is theft. So our entire system is based on theft and money. And it must get worse. And so it's the entire base level of everything we're talking about has to. And so when most of the taxes to pay back the debt that they already have is actually not taxes, it's paid through inflation. And you don't have a vote in inflation. Does your vote matter at all? And so here's why that is a really hard riddle to solve, and why my book kind of focused on that, is we're not used to prices falling in an economy. We measure a system from a system. And so we don't see that we're both sides of, we're labor and purchasing. So every single one of us in our labor, if it's valuable, somebody else is purchasing it through something that they're doing. And we concurrently believe that we can get everything we vote for with our time and money. We want more value. But everything we want in our labor, we want our labor to go up, and we want our houses' prices to go up. And it's those two systems competing against each other that break the world. It's because we can't see we're the same person. And so you're having here. I'll use an example. The calculator app on your phone, people think it's free because of advertising. It's not free because it's advertising. If you look in the App Store on your phone, there will be 50 to 100 apps competing for your attention, the calculator apps. And it's a line of code. And there's no more entrepreneurs that want to compete with because it's free. So you get abundance, price falls to free, the productivity falls to its marginal cost of production, which is a line of code. The cost falls to its line of marginal cost, which is a line of code, which is free, and you get abundance. And then those entrepreneurs that would have created the next calculator app, or before there was technology like this, the next calculator, they move on to do different things. They move on to attack high cost margin in other industries, and prices fall. And so what is a result if you had a free market is prices would keep falling. And at the highest level of this, you can see it is economics isn't around value, it's around scarcity. And so if it was around value, the air you're breathing right now would be the most valuable. Right. Okay. But it's ludicrous. You couldn't create a business. You can't create a business around the air you breathe unless you're underwater or in space, right? So around scarcity. And that's the same thing that's happening with technology. It's creating abundance everywhere, and that price is falling. And where does your calculator app or your photos show up in a government measure of GDP? It doesn't, because it moves it to free. But the government measure of GDP is required, that needs to go up to be able to pay back the debt. So you get this vicious circle that the only way to pay it back is to destroy the money itself, which destroys the bonds of society.
Yeah. And my question to you, Jeff, because you mentioned this, you talked about, that there are two options. One, which is that you let the system collapse and we move into sort of anarchy, or you devalue the dollar, and that sort of keeps the ride going. I mean, surely, eventually, the only option is that society collapses. I mean, the ride can only go on for so long. I mean, how do you sort of see us getting beyond this? Because the day will come, surely, as society or as people, normal people, work to keep up. And, I mean, the statistic for the number of people that have got second and third jobs now is increasing, and consumer credit is going up and savings are going down. I mean, there's going to come a breaking point, isn't there? I mean, when do you foresee that happening? It's
already happening. So right now, as the Fed is tightening, you're going to have a complete credit collapse of the entire system. And if they kept tightening, and they won't forever, because the cascading credit collapse, remember, if the entire system is built on that credit and you tighten that credit, everything fails. Everything. Every bank fails. Now, and you can imagine what would happen in that. Just play that situation forward as it's happening all over the world. Central banks lose their independence because we vote for dictators who will take that away and print more money. So, and then if they loosen, then the game keeps going for some time, but it does collapse. Normally, these are reset. The third option is, and I hate to say this, but normally these are reset through global conflict, because the money is so broken and trade between nations is so important. If you just think, if you look around your environment right now and you think of how many things that you take for granted that are a requirement of global labor, coordinated labor, and if you break the underpinnings of the coordination of labor, then you start breaking society. Then what ends up happening is political leaders come in and pretend there's a solve from the existing system by blaming others in the existing system. We believe them, and we vote them more power. And then because they can't fix it through the system, they take us to war because the only way to control the population is then to make somebody outside of your borders the evil enemy. We believe that, and we go to war. That's how that's typically reset throughout time. My hope, and why I've spent so much time on Bitcoin and what I'm seeing in Bitcoin, is the transition from one system to another is through Bitcoin, and it's kind of rules without rulers, and that system is it's small now, but it's growing on a network effect, two network effects really, one on the base level, one on Lightning, and everything that's being built on top of that protocol level, that is a transfer from one's. It's like every new person that's building to Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, running a node is actually building a bridge to the other side, to a hopeful, truthful, abundant world that is building that bridge wider for everyone else to walk across. That's what it looks like.
I want to explore in a bit more detail how Bitcoin can prevent further conflicts, because I think we've seen the start of this of these conflicts with what's going on with Russia and the rest of the world at the moment, and then we've seen other probably less prolific conflicts. But I mean, I don't know where that stops and where that ends. Nobody knows. But what does it look like on the other side of the bridge with Bitcoin? And I'm going to be sharing this interview with not just people that are hardcore Bitcoiners, but people that know a little bit about Bitcoin, but don't understand how it fits in this context. So maybe we could delve into that a little bit.
So from a high level, most people don't understand, probably like I do, or like many economists do, or people that have understood this, is they don't understand how the plumbing works of our existing system. That you interact, you trust others that have their eye on the ball of the plumbing, and you build your life on top of the plumbing. Your houses are on top of the plumbing. Your jobs are on top of the plumbing. Everything the emergent complex behavior we call life is based on top of that plumbing. And most people don't spend the time to go down to that plumbing level because it's too hard to understand. Similarly, and that means they wouldn't understand how broken the plumbing is, nor how to fix it. They trust somebody else has that job, and I'll just go and live my life. I'll work my job. And that's why it's getting worse and worse and worse, because people don't understand it. Similarly, most people don't understand the plumbing level at Bitcoin, what it actually looks like at a protocol level and what it'll do. And they don't want to spend the time there. So because it's really hard to take 1,000 hours to really understand why that's different.
And people are struggling financially more, so they kind of need to put their brain power into fixing those immediate issues, right? These are not.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens, yeah. Kevin. Those short-term issues. How do I put enough food on my table? Or how do I make enough money to escape the dangers of the existing financial system? Become all they think about, and or how do I march against this political party to elect the political party that I want? And they waste all their time actually feeding the beast that is making it worse. And so they spend more and more of their time in that system. I'm going to try to do this quickly, but it's going to take more work for some of the people listening, and they should read an article I wrote called "Finding Signal in a Noisy World." Technology is hard to understand because it competes against the existing system. It's outside of the existing system, and therefore, it typically gives monopolies typically fight the technology, and the technology starts at the bottom up. So technology it starts at the bottom up, and it's disruption to the monopoly. And the same thing would be true with money, right? So Blockbuster doesn't see Netflix. They protect their stores and add candy aisles to their stores. Well, Netflix, essentially technology that allows people to stream movies emerges. So this is a normal phenomenon, and what you can see. So that's just broadly in technology. Protocols themselves, pieces of technology that come in layers and harden each individual layer before the next value could be built upon, are even harder to understand. The internet itself is one of those protocols, and right now on this studio, we're sharing that protocol. We're building what's built on top of that protocol is what's providing the value to everybody listening and us being able to do this instead of taking planes to be able to meet in hotels to be able to do this work. But that protocol stack in the internet started with TCP/IP in late 60s, and it wasn't until the late 80s, 89, till HTTP connected that protocol stack to create hyperlinked web pages. And then if you think about where the internet was in 1989 or 1990 or 1995, people missed it until Google wasn't even started until 2000. So the point there is those layers come slowly because each layer needs to be sufficiently hardened before the next layer can build on top of it and provide value. And you can't see what's available on the next layer until it's there. So now if you look at the blockchain trilemma, you can solve 2 of 3 sides of a pyramid. Security on one side, decentralization on another, and scalability on another. 3 sides of a pyramid. On the base layer, Bitcoin solved for security and decentralization. And so at layer 1, it is the only platform or layer 1 that is decentralized and secure by design. So now you have to ask yourself, okay, it's open source code. I could copy this. I could create Dogecoin tomorrow and create a whole bunch of wealth. But by doing so, I must have less security or decentralization because it's a copy of the original chain. And it must have, and what extra utility would exist on that new copy? None, right? So there would be no utility for others to use. So then you see there. So if you can't copy that, then how do you provide different value for a whole bunch of people? So I create I create different 2 of 3. I solve scalability. But by solving scalability, I have to sacrifice decentralization or security. So let's first say I sacrifice security. You can see Solana hacks or any of these other things. They keep getting hacked. They go to zero eventually because they're insecure. Who would build a foundation? Who would build on top of a foundation that is insecure by design? No one. So now let's go to the other side and solve for decentralization. And let's say I increase block size so it can do more, as in Ethereum, or something else that I give more in the base layer to be able to do. I'm sacrificing decentralization. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, so I have something that's centralized and scalability and has scalability, and what use cases could work there? And what you find is blockchain is a really high cost structure for anything that needs to be centralized. And you can't have decentralized finance on top of a centralized protocol. So it's an oxymoron. What ends up happening is you have the scalability. So a database is a much more efficient solution for something that's centralized. So is Amazon going to move all of their products to a high cost blockchain? What you realize is Facebook going to move? Is Web3 going to be built on top of a high cost blockchain that's centralized? No chance. And so all of these things lose their utility because of the economic rationale alone around that centralization makes no sense. Nobody will pay for it long term. So that's what's happened. But I understand why if there's a whole bunch of money there, in a world where people are trying to escape an existing system that is terribly designed, they're going to race to where they can make more money. So they race into these things and they hurt others and kind of on the path. And once you're an entrepreneur building on top of one of those insecure or decentralized blockchain, what you try to do is you might kick the can down the road, but you're going to tell everybody mine works, it's okay, it's all good, until it doesn't. Right? So you're going to feed into the same thing that we see in the world. And then what's happening on top of Bitcoin is it's being built in layers. So now you have Lightning that is now produces, instead of 5 to 7 transactions per second, unlimited transactions effectively, without sacrificing the core layer. And everything comes back down to the base layer every 10 minutes. So you have an entire emergent system being built that is going to look like the new peer-to-peer internet, and people are measuring it from the existing system like a Ponzi scheme. It's insane. I can't believe how much value is going to be created in this, but more so, how that value is going to accrue to society, because it forces a system that we would never vote for.
It's interesting, the sort of the adoption and acceptance of Bitcoin. It's been one of those things, people call it a Ponzi scheme. And I remember back in, I think there was an episode of the Letterman show in 1995 where Bill Gates went on and he spoke about the emergence of the internet. And I think Letterman ripped him apart and said that, it was this sort of ridiculous idea that would never catch on, and email, why would you ever do that when actually you can use the post? I mean, for people that sort of are still dubious about Bitcoin, it sounds as though you're optimistic that the transition from the current fiat system to Bitcoin will happen at some point. And of course, it's a game of probability. But I mean, are you certain that this is sort of the only life raft with the current sinking ship?
I am, and I have to qualify that with. There is no certainty in life. If humanity chooses to live in a system of dystopian control, then we will do that.
Right.
But what I would say is this is a path to the other side, and it's a nonviolent protest that makes the world stronger with each new person that's moving over. And I know that's going to be hard to believe for some of your listeners, and they'll go back to their, how do I make more money today, and should my house value go up today, and they're going to make the system stronger as they do it. But if they explored what I'm talking about at a first principles level, I do think that this is unstoppable. If you ask me why, then network effects are really powerful. They're hard to stop, and what most people conflate or mistake about network effects is what I'm about to say. They think growth is network effects, and growth is not network effects. Network effects by design is when each new node of the network, or each new person on the network, will make the network stronger for every other person. So a telephone is a perfect example of a network effect. And if I own a telephone by myself, it's worthless. If one more person adds a telephone, it's more valuable. If one more person adds, it's more valuable to all three of us. If one more person, it's more valuable to all four of us. Each new person to the network doesn't make it less valuable to everyone. It makes it more valuable, and there's a mathematical formula that you can actually predict exactly what that looks like. So now you look at existing network effects that are run on the internet, why David Letterman missed this, and actually why Bill Gates missed this as well in a lot of cases, is because they didn't predict the network effects of what that would do and change communications and allow us to do everything through here, because it made the internet is one of the most powerful network effects around. And the internet at the base level is decentralized. It's open to everybody all around the world. Yes, a government like North Korea could shut it off, but it's pretty hard to shut off, and you could use a Tor browser to access it. And so then on top of the internet, you had a whole bunch of companies that use that same network effect, Google, Amazon, Facebook, use that same network effect and scaled their businesses and centralized these massively powerful companies that then use our data against us with that control. Now, what happens with the network effect, though, is once a company gets too big or centralized, it has to sacrifice some of the users for other users, and the network effect starts to unwind, and it starts to give value for somebody doing something different. That's how the economy works. So so today, these centralized powers, and you could use the centralized power of the US dollar in the same way. The US dollar has strong network effects, or had strong network effects. And now those network effects, by the definition of each new user, makes the network more valuable for all users, fails, and it starts to unwind. And now if you compare the network effects of Bitcoin and Lightning, every new user add more value for all new users. And so the explosion of growth is literally unstoppable. And more so, it stays decentralized. So it's the first time in history that we've ever had something that would stay decentralized and have a network effect. The network effect could go on forever. Because it doesn't have to change. It doesn't change the rules to control everything. It actually stays decentralized. So that very nature. So you imagine you start buying Bitcoin, and then your local store decides to take Bitcoin because they save themselves 3% of a credit card transaction, so they make more money. And then two other people say, "Oh, wow, I'm going to do this because they're giving me incentive to pay in Bitcoin." And then another business does, and another business does it. And that's what's happening around the world. And there's nothing nothing anybody can do to stop it, because it's providing so much value to people who are using it.
Do you see Bitcoin working alongside CBDCs, or do you think it's an either-or situation? So you mentioned we get to choose what kind of future we want as a civilization, whether it's some kind of programmable government money, CBDC, dystopian future, or whether it's a true free future using Bitcoin. But quite often these things are a mishmash of both or somewhere in the middle. How do you see... What do you think will happen with CBDCs? Because they are coming, I believe. And how do you think people will use Bitcoin? Because Michael Saylor talks about having a digital US dollar as kind of like your checking account to spend with, and your savings account as BTC. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So CBDCs are coming, and they won't work. Like literally. So if you just think about CBDC, today, the only reason the economy works at all, and it doesn't work for the majority of the population, is because we've granted central banks an ability to manipulate money. And so what you're saying with the CBDC is they're not manipulating money enough, they can do it more. Right? It's insane.
Right.
It is so insane. And what we forget is we have the power, not them. They are just like when you say government or they or those people, you actually abdicate your own responsibility, and you don't realize how much power you actually have. And I've used this example countless times, but when the BlackBerry, when Apple came out, when the iPhone came out, I was convinced, 100% convinced, that I would never change from my BlackBerry because I loved it. I loved the buttons. And then upon seeing the iPhone, my mind changed immediately, and I bought the iPhone. And so that played out hundreds of thousands and millions of times, killed BlackBerry and made Apple super successful. Now here's the point. I'm pretty good at foreseeing technology changes. It's what I've made my career on. And I couldn't predict my own behavior change until I saw something that gave me more value. And that thing that I saw that gave me more value was in development for 3 years before I saw it. How could any centralized control structure predict the economy and the behavior of all participants in the economy before it was released? So what ends up happening is the free market is that. It's our ideas solving problems. And so if you centralize all that power in very few hands, living standards as a result must collapse, because you can't get effective you can't get effective growth. And that growth, those ideas, we use the term technology, but it's just our ideas building on top of other ideas and trying different things to be able to solve problems, is what all life is made of. Our living standards are a byproduct of that. And you can't, if you that's why communism didn't work, right? Because if you centralize that control in very few hands, the living standards must decline. By logical extension, CBDC, by doing that, is stealing your time, is stealing all of that in the name of control. And why would you give that? If that terrifies you, and it should terrify you, especially where technology is going, because prices should be falling. You should have abundance instead of living in a make-believe world delivered to you by rulers. So you're working class. So essentially, it's modern-day slavery. It should terrify you. Then the antidote to that is Bitcoin. But the antidote is the free market. The antidote is a very prosperous growth path where prices fall. Where people are mismeasuring Bitcoin is because Bitcoin is, the existing system is 4 orders of magnitude bigger. Not 4 times bigger, 4 orders of magnitude bigger. So they're measuring Bitcoin through the system that is manipulating. And it's going up and down in nominal, in their dollar terms. Instead of what's really happening is Bitcoin is measuring the rest of the system because it's outside the system. So when people are thinking Bitcoin pricing go up, it's actually, they're defaulting to their measure of the system today and reinforcing that. It's not Bitcoin prices going up. It's every price against Bitcoin falling forever against everything else. And it doesn't matter. And houses are going to fall to their utility value on Bitcoin and maybe go up in the existing system. And that transition is hard to see unless you. So which frame you're looking at will define kind of what your beliefs are. Here's a way to look at that. If you were here's a business way to look at that. If you were an executive at Sears, one of the largest department stores from 1995 to 2010 in the U.S., you were an executive, you were fighting. It was getting harder and harder and harder. And business would have looked really bad. If you were an executive at Amazon, it would have been exactly the opposite. The world was getting easier and easier and easier, and your business was on fire. Those 2 frames of view on the exact same world would have defined your hope, what you believed in, or your everything's getting worse. And it was just dependent on your view. And then if Sears failed and all the other retail stores failed in 1999 and nobody had a place to go shopping, that would be a bad day. But when they failed in 2010, nobody cared because the transition, more and more people were shopping at Amazon. Now take that example and move it up a level that defines everything on money. In that same frame of reference, if you're in Bitcoin and spending more of your time in the ecosystem and watching what's happening, you're going to see a bright, hopeful future. And if you're spending more of your time in the existing, worried about what's going to happen in the existing, it's going to be awfully terrifying.
It's a fascinating perspective. And Jeff, just to touch on this transition that you talk about, I mean, we expect it to come, but this transition, I can't imagine will be a peaceful transition. You know, the current fiat system is very powerful. It's a really complex beast. What sort of things should we be looking out for during this transition that might put people off Bitcoin? I mean, is there anything which, you know, you think is a sort of an organized attack on the idea of Bitcoin? Is there anything that's sort of being pushed through the media that we should be looking for?
All of these things, the control of population. All money is information. You don't want more money. You want more. If you wanted more money, a Venezuelan bolivar would be equal to a US dollar. You want more of what you believe the money will buy you. So when you manipulate information, and everybody's looking through that information, then you can expect society to be really confused. And when your entire society is based on more and more manipulation, effectively of information, then what I would say is broadly expect the unexpected, because all of society is looking through that manipulation, and they can't see, and they truly believe that their thing is the thing that other people are missing. And they're all looking through the same system. So climate change is a good example. Climate change and Bitcoin mining being bad for climate is the most egregious, ridiculous thing on the
Right.
that I've ever heard of, because it presupposes that an inflationary monetary system, essentially making up money to grow forever on a finite planet, isn't climate change, and that is climate change. It's unsolvable. So every single new development that we develop, by the way, I'm a mentor and advisor to many companies in the climate change track, or energy companies, and every single innovation that they bring to bring more value to the world and more energy, or more clean energy, has to be offset by more monetary easing to be able to destroy that advantage. Should be flowing, that productivity gain should be flowing to society in the form of lower prices, but instead it's being captured by central governments.
I saw you were tagged on a tweet yesterday from Lynn Alden, who put something out about energy. And she said that she views energy as one of the biggest global risks going forward. It will be cyclical to some extent, but until the supply side issues are addressed, it will be the monster that keeps coming back. How do you? It's a little bit off piece, but as you're involved with some renewable energy firms, and you've got a very astute eye on the macro environment. How do you see energy security changing, and how does Bitcoin work alongside that?
Yeah, so you could say energy and Bitcoin are synonymous almost. They will merge, and why? The energy companies can make more money by mining Bitcoin from their stranded energy or in their process, and that whole so Bitcoin mining searches out for the lowest cost energy with stranded energy, and from it also solves methane by creating cleaning the world by giving an economic rationale to do so in Bitcoin mining. And you could build a bigger solar grid because you can pay for it with Bitcoin mining to be able to transition. So the energy, again, if you go back to first principles, you can't print more energy. So governments that are saying, I'm going to make more energy by destroying monetary units to print more energy, it's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. The free market solves energy by finding better ways to just do what we've always done, going from fire to coal to oil to natural gas to whether it's nuclear, whether it's solar, it doesn't actually matter. That's what humanity does. We search for better and better ways to free our time. What's against that is money destroying our time. So you can't solve this problem from Lynn is right, because it's the master resource. Even a company can't make a long-term bet on energy right now, because the underlying financial system, they can't make a long-term bet on anything.
I think anybody that's listening to this now, they're going to be thinking, oh my God, all of what I thought was true, or the way that I view the world is maybe not the right way. And I think sometimes it takes a little while for people to dismantle their own beliefs about how things really work. And I think that's half the battle for us as individuals, as sovereign individuals, to say, actually, no, I believe in the Bitcoin standard. I'm going to buy Bitcoin. I'm going to use Bitcoin. I'm going to have conversations like this. I'm going to share conversations like this. But what else can we do as individuals, and how can we empower ourselves more to see that change?
So, Kevin, for you and Ben, literally, if what I'm saying is true, and go as deep as you want, if what I'm saying is true, stop worrying about everything, all the other cryptos, because it's nonsense. And the more and more that you move into Bitcoin, what you're going to see, is both an asymmetric bet on the world that will create tons of wealth for you, because most people don't see what we're talking about right now. And so you'll be able to provide them more value by and that's the point. Life is about creating value. We are all connected. And so if you create more value for people instead of just a kind of a Ponzi scheme on something else, that value comes back to you typically. Now, what's happening on Bitcoin too is as you went further and further into that, and you saw everything that's being built on top of it, what that actually means is you actually help make it happen. Everything we do, single thing that every one of us does makes a difference. And so we make a difference on reinforcing the world we want to see. And we do, even if we tell ourselves, well, I'm just doing it to make enough money and then I'll do something else, right? We make a difference in the world we see as a result of our actions on either side. So if you want something to happen faster, just, by the way, the people that are doing it are going to make way more money anyways, but it's not the money. It actually changes the world from a really dystopian nightmare to something really powerful, truthful, hopeful, abundant. And the more and more people that wake up and actually take that step across the bridge, build the bridge wider for the rest of the world to walk across.
I love that. Ben, is there anything else you wanted to ask Jeff? Anything you wanted to talk about?
I could sit here all day, and I've got 1,000 questions I'd love to ask, but yeah, Jeff, I know that you're being very generous with your time this evening, and I think that's probably a great place to leave the show, I think, for today.
I think it's a wonderful place to end things, and I would just encourage people to share this interview and really consider what we've spoken about. So, Jeff, is there anything you wanted to end on?
No, I think this was great. Really good meeting you guys, and wish you the best.
Thanks. We're motivated like you are to make a better future for us and for, the children of the world and generations to come, because I think otherwise, what's the point, really? It's one of the great things about doing this show. And it was interesting what you were saying about other cryptos. And there's a lot of crap out there. There is, but I think there's also some things that do solve problems. But ultimately, if we haven't solved the fiat Ponzi, then none of the other problems mean anything, right? So we're addressing the ground that everything else is built on. Thanks once again, and we'll talk to you hopefully again very soon.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. This really does help and allows other people to find us online. You can keep up to date with new releases of the podcast by subscribing and following us on Twitter or Instagram for the latest crypto-related news. Information provided by Cryptopulse via this podcast, website, social media channels, and any other medium does not constitute financial advice, investment recommendations, or any other type of advice whatsoever. The Cryptopulse team are not professional financial advisors. Trading and purchasing cryptocurrencies do carry risks, and anybody wishing to partake in such activities should seek professional advice.